In this video, we want to look at how twitches differ depending upon the fiber type of skeletal muscle. But first, we're going to start in A up here, upper left, and we're going to look at an individual twitch and how it goes through multiple phases. And so when our stimulus arrives right here at time 0, we initially get what's called a latent period during which no tension has yet developed. This is the period during which the molecular events of excitation and contraction are coupling. So that involves the calcium release and diffusion, the binding to troponin, the moving of tropomyosin out of the way, and then finally the formation of cross bridges and tension development. So we start to enter a second phase here, the period of contraction. And the steepness of that phase will depend upon how much and how rapidly the calcium is released and how many cross bridges we form in that short period of time. Now, as our action potential wanes, and our calcium is no longer stimulated to be released, it's going to start to be pumped back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And of course, that's going to allow the tropomyosin to slide back into position, starting to inhibit cross-bridge formation, and we're going to get a fall in our tension here over time. Now, if we come down to B, what we see is that the different fiber types have different twitch characteristics. The slow type 1 fiber has a very long duration twitch, and by long we mean about 0.2 of a second or 200 milliseconds. So it's still a very fast event, but that's very long for a skeletal fiber twitch. Now, what that's going to tell us is that very few whole muscle contractions can rely on individual twitches because they're so short. So we'll come back to that later, but it's going to mean that we're going to have to add twitches together in order to get effective muscle tension in many cases. However, the twitches are the building blocks of that whole muscle tension. If we look at our second type, the type 2 fibers, right? The type 1 is a slow fiber. The type 2 fibers are the fast fibers. They fall into two subtypes. They can be either sort of intermediate. They're called fast oxidative glycolytic, and that means that they use both oxidative and anaerobic mechanisms of generating their ATP. And then finally, the very fastest and most powerful fibers are the type 2Xs, or the fast glycolytic. Glycolytic meaning they're adapted to make ATP from carbohydrates anaerobically and rely on that almost entirely once they're activated. Now, the tension is normalized here to 100%, but note that the type 2 fibers tend to be larger and can generate a lot more tension than the type 1 fibers, generally speaking. Now, if we come over here to C, finally, we can see the arrangement of these muscle fibers within motor units, right? So a motor unit, again, is the motor neuron plus the muscle fibers it innervates. So we're showing you just 3 individual motor units, one of each type here. Again, motor neurons would either exit the ventral horn of the spinal cord or come out of the brain and then have axons that run through the cranial nerve to control facial muscles and the chewing muscles, things like that. But in either case, those motor neurons branch to innervate fibers that are dispersed throughout the muscle. This generates an even pull within that muscle as tension is developed. We also note that these are activated in a sequence once tension starts to be developed through generating effort output through these motor neurons. And that is that the slow fibers actually fire first. They have a low threshold, and we'll start to activate those fiber types to contract first. And then we'd start to bring in, as long as we need a stronger contraction, effort is high enough, we'd start to bring in the fast fibers, right? The type 2As would come in next, right? They have a higher threshold, they fire second. And then the fast glycolytic, those strongest and most powerful fibers would come in last, only if needed for very strong and powerful contractions.